right, hello. Bonjour tout le monde. Merci de votre accueil chaleureux. Je suis ravi d'être ici parmi vous, de parler de nos codes. Et malheureusement, ça, c'est tous les Français que je connais, donc il faut changer anglais. Hello, everyone. I am extremely excited to be here with all of you to talk about this really important topic that seems to keep coming up, which is scaling enterprise systems with no code. First of all, I'm very honored to have Heimstaden that flew all the way from Norway to be here to discuss their experience with you. So can we get a round of applause for Heimstaden? Thank you so much. So, you know, most of this talk actually is going to be centered around Alexander and Anders and their experience, and I want you to get the opportunity to ask them questions. We're first just going to talk at a high level about what Xano is and why it feels so difficult to sell into the enterprise. But instead of me telling you our experiences personally as a vendor, I'm going to hand it off to Heimstaden to discuss that. So I'll just start and go through really quickly. For those of you that don't know, Xano is a scalable no-code backend. So what does that mean? We provide three primary components that comes in a powerful server, a flexible Postgres database, and a no-code API builder. And so our server is a dedicated resource. Every paid plan is a single tenant deployment, and you can deploy in the country of your choice. And actually, as of today, we actually just launched our Paris, France region, so we're very excited about that. We also have lots of certifications like ISO 27001, HIPAA, etc. So these are things that large enterprise organizations look for in order to consider no-code adoption. But even so, selling to no-code enterprise organizations seems to be very difficult. How many of you, raise your hand, have actually tried to sell to an enterprise before or bring no-code to the enterprise? Okay, so a couple of you. Here are some of the objections that might sound familiar to you. And if I could broad strokes, I think the issues or the barriers that no-code tools have to selling into enterprises, I would bucket them into a technological bucket and then a cultural bucket. So what I mean by that is on the technology side, you probably have heard things like it needs to potentially be an on-prem deployment. There might be custom policies, role-based access controls, things that, you know, rightfully so, are very important to very large organizations. The second piece is a little bit harder to overcome, which is the cultural piece. You know, traditional developers don't necessarily, they're not super excited to adopt no-code tools. There's architectural supervision that really isn't baked into a lot of these no-code tools, so on and so forth. So as I mentioned, instead of me trying to kind of break down how to start to overcome this, I'm going to hand it over to Alexander and Anders. So here you are, my friends.
Thank you very much. So first off, just my name is Alexander. I work with technology in Heimstaden. And
yeah, my name is Anders, and I also work with technology in Heimstaden.
And believe it or not, me and Anders, we go way back. We have worked together in multiple projects before, and we even started a bank together in Norway. So believe it or not, the two people that you are looking at right here are actually officially licensed by the Norwegian government to run banks. So that says more about the Norwegian banking infrastructure than it says about us, is my opinion on that. But we're really honored to tell you guys about Heimstaden and our story with no-code and low-code. We've been at this for a while, and why don't you give us an intro to what Heimstaden actually is?
Yeah, let's give us a bit context on what Heimstaden is. So we're a leading residential real estate investor in Europe. And to differ us from our peers, we also not only own our properties, but we also manage and operate our properties, which also gives us much more flexibility in investing in technology. So to give just the hard facts, so we have more than 160,000 homes with a combined value of more than 30 billion euros, so it's large numbers. We have 250,000 customers, we're in 10 markets, we have more than 1,700 employees. And that's bring some requirements to what kind of technology we can use. And also, those kind of numbers increases the complexity a lot. So some of you might have an apartment that you rent out, and then you know it could be quite a lot of work, but it's manageable for one apartment. But when you have that many apartments, it gets very difficult very early. Thank you. Let's have an example. So for one market, we can have several hundred move-ins and move-outs every month. And the things you need to deal with then is like you have to manage keys, deposits, settlements, viewings, inspection, and so on. And to do that several hundred times a month requires very good software. Another thing I want to mention about Heimstaden is the mindset. So it's a very entrepreneurial mindset of the business where you're constantly seeking better solutions and challenging the way we do things today. And also, we're not afraid of throwing old solution away if we find something better. As our founder says, it's like tomorrow different, always better. So let's just jump straight up where we are today. So as it says, no-code powers our property management system. And for us, no-code isn't a strategy, it's the strategy. We're full on no-code all the way, which differs us from quite a lot, where it's usually a part of the marketing budget or something like a small app, but we're full on. And if you look on the Germany, which is our largest market, there we have 30,000 apartments. And with 30,000 apartments, you also get 60,000 tenants, our customers. And also you get around 90,000 transaction lines every month that needs to be posted in the accounting system. And it's several millions of euros running through the system every month. And we did this in more or less 1 year, which is pretty impressive, if you ask me. And we did it with a fraction of the team size.
And this is to show you a little bit about one of the several hundreds of screens of apps that we've built for our property management system, and how we actually convert our backend into usable screens for our internal users, and so they can manage their everyday work. So we have everything from property managers to people that are doing inspections of apartments, to people that are doing refurbishments of apartments, to people that are doing just regular customer service. And each of them have a unique role to play in the Heimstaden life cycle of an apartment, and each of them needs different tools and different features from our setup in order to do their job effectively. So in Germany, we have around 300 employees, and each of them have their unique role to play in the management of over 30,000 apartments and more. So this is just to give you a sneak peek of the tool that is actually running in Germany today, built solely on and with only no-code and low-code tools.
So then we've seen where we are today, but if we jump 1.5 years back, it was a completely different story. So we had done, like, all our technology was by the book, or the old book at least. We had our microservices, we had our Kubernetes clusters in AWS, we had our DevOps teams, our front-end developers, back-end developers, you name it, we had it. But still we had a growing concern and something like didn't feel right. And to top it off, we also had a very hard deadline that we had to make. And we saw that it's just not possible with the tools that we're using today. Then we started thinking.
Yeah, and then we started thinking, and the journey towards no-code for Heimstaden started way beyond before even development started. So again, just to reiterate some of the numbers at play, we're managing in our systems, we need to be able and capable to manage over 30 billion euros in asset values. So we need to be very, very careful with the suppliers that we operate with and with the technology that we buy, because of just the amount and the scale of the company itself. So we did pretty much almost a year of research and development, and that consisted of just signing up for different tools, looking for different options that were out there, but also hands-on development in those tools with standalone use cases, just battle testing pretty much every tool we came across. And eventually we landed on Xano as the main backend for all development that we do. We also use a tool called Camunda out of Germany to do workflow automation and automate processes. And then we all use Retool as the front end. So the whole stack is top to bottom, no code and low code. And the decision didn't necessarily come lightly either. I mean, again, from a company of our size, doing this type of investigation and doing this type of transition comes with a lot of pros that you have to prove, but it also comes with a lot of cons. You have already an existing big development organization that are used to working in one particular fashion and one particular way with certain types of tools. But again, the end goal and the decision where we finally landed was that this is the only way to actually, like, going in this direction with Xano, Camunda, and Retool is the only way we can actually achieve the commercial targets that we set for our IT platform. So that was kind of the summary of our entire investigation over a year, landed on that premise, that we need to make our technology development commercially viable for Heimstaden. And this is the best type of setup for us to both ensure the security and compliance needs that we have and requirements that we have in that regard, but also the speed and rate of development. And yeah, then comes the post-decision journey, which is getting the organization on board. And primarily, I would actually say getting our own organization within IT organization on board. So when we finally made the decision, we had a staff of around 45 developers, in-house developers, back-end and front-end, and so on and so on. And like, I know there are vendors in the space here that are trying to sell to enterprise and maybe trying to learn a few things about that from the stakeholder side of things. And I can tell you that getting to a point where you've made that decision, that comes with an enormous amount of not only organizational risk to the department making that decision, but it also comes at great personal risk and great personal stake. Because the journey to actually, from the decision was made to it was actually implemented, and we are now working within the tools, and the tools are our primary source of development. That journey took about 9 months to do. Just change management, talking to people, convincing people that this is the right way to go forward, and also having some very, very tough discussions and getting some very, very tough feedback from our developer staff that you can't really just ignore. But that is also the hard part about actual strategic implementation. Like, if you want, as Anna said, when we wanted to do no code and low code, we didn't just want to do it sort of as a standalone use case over there or as a small case over there. We wanted to actually do it top to bottom, foundational IT technology, billing, all of the core processes that comes with being a foundational technology provider. We wanted to do that in no-code and low-code tools. So when you do that kind of a decision and you have to face the strategic consequences of that in front of your organization, you really have to stand tough for a long, long time before you actually transition into the quote-unquote new world.
Yeah, and I mean, we learn a lot about people and their identity, and we're kind of surprised at how strongly someone identifies as a developer, and not only as a developer, but I'm a Python backend developer, and that's me, and I'm not going to do anything else. That's me. And we had, as you said, it was a tough time. A lot of people left, and a lot of people, some converts, and a lot of negative feedback. I mean, you should have seen the employee surveys from last year. I like quotes like, "I'm a developer, I'm not a mouse clicker." That was very common. But we also learned kind of what kind of the people that we want, what do they identify as? And that's problem solvers. And they have all this technology that they have in their tool belt to solve the problem. That's the one we want.
So we had to, we believe quite strongly in that, the no-code and low-code tool space is a new avenue to explore within technology. So we didn't want to necessarily just take old development methodologies and apply it to the new world, and take like Scrum, Agile, all of these processes and DevOps that we used in the old development team. We just want to sort of pick it up and throw it up and get it to the new way of working. So we needed to re-identify a little bit how our own staff can view themselves and what titles they can assume and what skills they can learn. But also from a, setting the mark in the sand that this is sort of, now we are here, we are transitioning over here, and how can we do that? So we coined the phrase to be a product engineer, and the product engineer is a problem solver in Heimstaden. You're not a developer, you're not a, you don't have one specific thing you do. You solve problems, you get given a problem, that problem is your task, and your task is to use the tools available to you to solve that problem, which is a product engineer. And I think we have also these concepts of, there are specializations within being a product engineer. Some people come from the front-end development world, some people come from the back-end development world, some people come from business development, and we have a mix of all types of people working for us in our development team. But the product engineer is kind of a combination of all of those three traits. So in order to work for Heimstaden at this moment, you need to be able to work the entire stack from top to bottom. So we don't have dedicated back-end people, we don't have dedicated front-end people. We train each and every one of our staff in the full stack, so they can be a problem solver or a product engineer. And then finally on that note as well, just to give you a little bit of history around the journey towards that, is when we started out, again, we didn't want to take the old methodologies and processes and port it over into the new world. We wanted to create our own way. That also meant, like, if we're being honest with ourselves as well, that also meant that a lot of the early development was kind of open season for people, right? They were doing their own thing in their own ways, and they were doing their own problem solving in their own ways, which led to a lot of sort of different solutions across the application. But gradually, I'm very glad we did that actually, because that also became a pool in which we could draw and create our final process with. So eventually we used all of that early experimentation, and we created a step-by-step program on how to actually launch and build Heimstaden technology in the new world, which has some, me and Anders here are both part of the architectural supervision piece, where we actually oversee all of the development that's ongoing, and we make sure that there are standards in place, and we make sure that these and these types of methodologies needs to be used for these and these use cases. And there's always, at least on the core critical processes like billing and the calculator for revenue and all of that, these core processes is always touched by a senior developer or a senior person or senior product engineer on our staff. So it's also a little bit about the criticality of the process you're working on.
Yes, and then I want to touch upon this, because how we hire and train product engineers, we see it as maybe the greatest challenge of no code at scale, because you can't really find talent. You can't post a job ad, I want a product or a no code developer, and if you get one, probably doesn't have any experience with the tools that you're working in now. So how do you go about that? But we also see it as the greatest opportunity, because the barrier of entry is so much lower than with code. You suddenly can tap into a completely different talent pool than you had before. So we have people coming from the business side, which is highly intelligent, and they kind of tech savvy, but they would never go to code. But now, with the tools we have now, they can solve amazing problems, which leads to the range we have in our team now is pretty amazing, if you ask me. I mean, we have people coming from the investment side and have kind of a private equity fund background, together with people with more than 30 years of back-end, hardcore back-end developer experience. And they're now working together with no code and creating products from A to B, talking to the business side, understanding the problem, creating databases, APIs, and the front end, having the tool ready for customers to use, which is really cool to see. And also having those I mean, Alexander, you talked about the 3 distinct islands. So you have front end, you have back end, and then you have product or business, what you want to call it. And before they worked together, but it was fairly distinct islands. But now that we get all of them into the middle, and then in the intersection, that's where we have our product engineer, the ones that can work in all of these 3. And we then do the recruitment, then we map out, okay, where's your strong point? So you come from backend, obviously you need to learn more about front end and business. And then when we have people coming from all of these 3 and they work together and they elevate each other up, it's really great to see in our product team.
Yeah, it was just a short personal note on that. We had a gathering at Anders' cabin by the sea in a couple of months back, and we were just doing a scan of the people that we had on board, our team, and I almost actually got a tear in my eye, because the diversity of backgrounds that we have working together is quite something unique and spectacular, if you ask me. It's something after 20 years of working with technology, I've never seen any kind of team like this. So that was pretty cool. If you look at what impact has actually Xano and the implementation of no-code and low-code had on our organization, there are some obvious sort of commercial aspects to that immediately off the bat. So we did a calculus on this in terms of the hiring need that we would have needed to do if we were to continue on in the direction we were at, which ended up in, if we were actually, with the demand that we had and the old methodologies that we employed, if we were to continue down that road, we would have to hire an additional 7 backend developers at 200K euros per pop. So that is, even that is a huge cost saving on our end. But I think the more interesting point to that is that not only did we have to hire those, or not hire those people, but we also actually increased the throughput of the entire technology organization by a factor of 10. So with everything that we've built now in Germany and for the rest of Heimstaden, if we were to, again, apply the old methodologies all the way through, we were looking at what we have done now in a year. We would easily be looking at 5-6 years of development to actually get to this point, which to me is quite incredible. And there is often one key factor that is overlooked, and I think that is because it's very hard to quantify. And that is when you actually do visual communication styles across multilingual and multicultural organizations. So we operate in 10 different markets. Everyone speaks English, so sort of. But even when we talk English together, the pitfall of miscommunication that you can jump into, even I'm a Norwegian guy, I know English from working internationally and all of that, but I also use Norwegian words or Norwegian formulations while I'm speaking English, right? And so do people from Germany, and so do people from France, and so do people from all over Europe. And to do that level of communication on a high technical degree, and you need to really understand the requirements of everything you're building on a multinational level, only using text, email, all of that type of stuff, that the miscommunication and the misunderstandings you had just completely goes off the charts. So the importance for us, and I think a lot of the factor of being able to increase tenfold in technology throughput is actually this notion that we can visually communicate with each other. It's very easy for a person in Germany to understand what we are building when you have everything visually represented, and you no longer have the barrier of knowing the syntax of a particular coding language to understand what's going on. I think also the main benefit of that as well is that they can participate in a much higher degree than before. So where technology used to be just a black box for them, they can actually now comment and they can participate in the development journey, which overall not only increases the efficiency of your technology journey, but it also increases the quality of what you are building. So that has become one of my, one of the things that I didn't really expect would be this powerful once we got into the uses of these tools. Yeah. And I think that's it for Heimstaden and our journey. I hope you learned something.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think one thing to emphasize is the risk that Alexander and Anders took to implement a no-code strategy within such a large organization. Like, what he didn't say was he was getting like hate mail from the engineers that were at the organization saying, you don't know what you're doing. There was just a lot of personal risk because if it didn't go well, then they would have probably lost their jobs.
Probably not be on this stage, at least.
Yes, he would not be on this stage. But I really have to give credit to you because obviously there's not a lot of organizational leaders that would be willing to do that. But you kind of saw the opportunity to save money, to move faster, and all the benefits that we all love about no-code. And the beauty is you've converted a bunch of traditional engineers, right, that were very against it. And now they've adopted it, and everyone's able to work well together. And this whole notion of the product engineer, which is, we believe, I think all of us in this room believe that the definition of what it means to be a software developer is changing. If you are a systems thinker, if you're a product owner, with the tools today, you should be able to solve really any problem that is put in front of you. So back to what I was mentioning about the two buckets. There's the technological piece, which I'll talk about just in a second. Does the tool actually match up to the needs of a large organization like Heimstaden, as an example? But I actually think the cultural piece is harder because you're not always going to get a Alexander and Anders at the other side of when you're trying to talk to an enterprise and convince them of the benefits of using no-code. And there is one tool that we have called distributed development. Distributed development is actually a paradigm, and we believe that you can't just sell a no-code tool to the enterprise. You have to sell a new paradigm of working together. So as they mentioned, there's architectural supervision, there's product engineers, there's a way that you can work successfully within an organization. And we partner with an individual named Jack Morrow. He's sitting right up here. He has a talk just at 4:15 on the dynamics of distributed development. So if you're interested in kind of the way to implement no-code tools within the enterprise and do so successfully, checking the boxes on what large organizations care about, I highly recommend going to this talk. So this doesn't answer all of the questions around culture, but it actually brings us one step closer. And I think on the technology side, Xano is a big piece of it. If you've learned anything today, it's that Xano is operating at scale, right? And Xano is just one piece of the puzzle. It's the back end, but we aim to be the best back end to serve any use case. So you can start with no code and scale with no code. And that's why I always like to say that Xano is enterprise ready, because you can deploy on your cloud, on your own infrastructure, on-prem. We have things like role-based access controls and everything that a larger organization is going to need to be successful. And the reality is that Xano is actually already operating at scale. So we've already deployed over 50,000 backends around the world, 84 countries, and that includes large organizations, not only like Heimstaden here today, but Siemens, Qualtrics, etc. So it is happening. It's slowly starting to change, and little bit by little bit, I think we're going to usher in a new era of no-code. And one of the things that I'm excited to announce officially here on this stage is that as of last week, we closed a $10 million Series A to basically empower anyone, any organization, to build scalable world-class software. Thank you. So we couldn't be more excited to partner here with Heimstaden. And I want to open it up to Q&A, and I want you to feel free to ask them any question that you want, because this is an example of a massive enterprise organization that has adopted no-code. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question for you. So you were talking, yeah, okay. So you were talking about how you got a lot of negative feedback when you were trying to implement this. And one of the types of feedback that we have gotten is, why would we rely on something that we can't control? What happens if that tool goes out of business, or, you know, quadruples their cost or something like that? I'm just curious if you got that kind of feedback and how you responded to it.
Yeah, so for sure we got that kind of feedback in many ways than one, both from our developer staff, but I would say also from the management of the company, right? Because there's two aspects to that question. It's what the developers think about the reliability of the platform itself, but it's also the business angle of that, like how reliable is this collaboration with this partner. So we had a few rounds on that to alleviate some of those concerns, because we also brought these concerns to Xano and to the rest of the platforms that we collaborate with when they were raised. And how we kind of moved past that feedback was both in terms of a sturdy agreement between the companies. So a sturdy agreement between Heimstaden and Xano, that was critical to get in place. But also, you know, that self-hosting capabilities of Xano, hugely important in that regard. Being able to actually control your own destiny. Like, I wouldn't say it's like, it's not a the self-hosting type that Xano provides is not sort of the marketing self-hosting. It's actually self-hosting. So we have control of our entire infrastructure setup with Xano and all of that. So I think partly it's getting to the right organizational agreement framework that alleviates that business angle of it. But then you also, when you start digging into the actual tech and actually see what you can do on your own without Xano, it kind of speaks for itself in our opinion. And a lot of the feedback that came from the technology side of it kind of dissipated after that. Yeah, hope that answered the question.
Yeah, and just the only thing, while you're getting the mic, the only thing that I would add is, yeah, the durable contract. I think there is an element of just making sure there's continuity. Like, what if worst case scenario happens? How do you make sure there's provisions in the contract that basically alleviate the concerns of anyone that is asking those questions? And so, you know, like I said, I think there was goodwill to work through some of these things, but it is something that definitely has to be ironed out, and that the no-code tool has a plan for.
So my question is for Prakash. I'm a big believer in business. You have to be crazy to stand out. What's something Xano's looking to do to be more crazy in, say, the next year, 2, 5 years, 10 years? What's something Xano's looking to do to be more crazy, to stand out in the no-code space?
I think, you know, it was very non-consensus for us to focus 100% on the back end. I think people generally said when we get started that you can't really build a business just focused on the back end. I think the second piece of that is it was non-consensus that we did not abstract away the engineering concepts. Meaning we were told instead of APIs, you should do like zaps or workflows or scenarios. And we made a very conscious effort not to do that, because we knew that when you met limitation, you needed to understand how the world of software was created. And so you could then unblock yourself with the tool. And I think because of that, to both what Heimstaden was saying, you're able to have product engineers working with real software developers because it's a tool that they can actually trust and understand. So I think like where we want to go into the future, I don't necessarily think this is crazy. I think generally people understand. We actually believe that it is our responsibility as a platform to educate and usher in the next generation of builders. And so a lot of what we're like, yes, there is the platform component and the product component, but another third very big pillar for us is education. Meaning when someone comes to Xano, how do we turn them into a product engineer? How do we make them feel like they're upskilling and building confidence?
Hey guys, thanks for the insights. I just wanted to know, what specific things did your existing developers miss from the old coding world? And if any issues, what are Xano doing to address those in the future?
Very good question. I think if I sum it up in, I can probably sum it up in one word, and that would be safeguards. So in the traditional development world, say you're working with a development pipeline that is based off of a GitHub repository, for instance. When you publish new code, there's always reviewers in place, and there's always sort of these checks and balances along the way. If you're doing it properly, you're probably also having some automated testing and checking the deploy pipeline even before it actually gets deployed. And then you have multiple stages of environments, right? So I think safeguards would be the #1 feedback that we got. And in terms of what Xano is doing to alleviate some of those concerns, we've seen from when we started back in August with back in August last year, when we started developing in Xano, we have seen tons of improvements in that regard, not only on the sort of the actual function stack where you have a lot of safeguard type of logic that you can build into each of your functions, but you also have things like branches, for instance, which fairly similar to branches in a GitHub kind of way, where you can develop in one area and then launch and relaunch into the production environment. All of these improvements have come as we have grown with the tool as well. So I think partly the answer to that question is there's tons of development that Xano has done to sort of put those safeguards in place. But there's also an organizational component to that, where you have to train people in the new way of working, right? So I'm trying not to, okay, let's have it exactly like it used to be in GitHub, I'm trying to avoid that as much as possible, but take the best out of that process and put it into the new process. So that's the best answer I can give you at this point. But we're also still working on our methodologies in that regard.
Thank you for the talk. It was really interesting. Xano does allow for coding extras, like you can input some code there. Did you use any code at all, or you really went straight for no code at all?
Where are you? Oh, there you are. Okay, yeah, I see you now. I would say in the beginning, we probably used a little bit of code, especially through Lambda functions and that sort of thing. But I think actually that is a result of getting to know the tool and getting training in the tool. So we've always had this sort of try to teach our people that try it with a no-code mindset first, because the benefits that if you can do it that way, the benefit is the betterment to your next person. So the next person would easier understand what you're doing if you were able to do it within the frameworks that you are provided, right? So, but in the beginning, when people didn't know the nitty-gritty stuff and sort of know the best practices and didn't really have the experience, sometimes they reverted back to some code. And you gotta pick your battles sometimes, and so we kind of let that mature over time. And now I would say we're virtually no code all the way through. And as I usually say to other people I'm talking to, I have not met a use case yet where a line of code were to be required from me. So if I'm not meeting that requirement, I'm pretty sure that you are not meeting that requirement. So that's the ambition, at least.
We have time for one more question.
Hi there. It's you. Can you elaborate about your choice for the front-end tool and the workflow automation tool and how they worked out a little bit more, so people here would be probably interested in knowing that experience too?
Sure. This is partly addressing a few risk elements in the platform overall. So from an organizational standpoint, it's important for us to have a balanced risk approach to the different technology components that are in our stack. So having a pure backend is a architectural decision. I would have made that architectural decision if it was code, if we were doing a regular coding project. And so having a pure backend, the sole job of that backend is to be efficient, deliver data to data consumers when needed. So that's sort of the role of that layer in the architecture. And then the reason why we chose different providers for the two subsequent stacks on top, like the business logic and the front end, is actually a division of risk in the architecture. So if we have all of the workflows built in a different system, that means that we can replace that system on demand when we need it without affecting the entirety of the stack. It also forces us to think in containers. It forces us to think that Xanos should live individually, and there shouldn't be too many dependencies between the layers of the architecture. So that's the sort of the overall risk assessment of dividing the platform up into different architectural layers. And if I'm super honest as well, it's also a commercial aspect to that, because we can negotiate differently with different vendors as well.
Okay. All right. Well, just want to thank everyone again for coming, and we'll hang around a little bit if you want to ask questions afterwards. But we really appreciate all of you, and hope you learned something.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.